So good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday to everyone. Hope everybody's having a fantastic morning so far. I would like to welcome you to our salary and compensation webinar here from Hiring Your Heroes. This is one of the more popular workshops that we do at our online, at our on-base summits that we do. And I also get the most feedback that we hear is from this particular presentation. Primarily because I know when I was transitioning out, the whole salary and compensation thing was a giant mystery out there about what you should ask, what you should know, and the fears of negotiation, that kind of thing. So this block of instruction purely is intended to sort of inform you about what's going on with compensation. What is civilian compensation versus military compensation? And then understanding the broad perspective of there's lots of things that play into compensation number. The first thing I want everyone to remember, and you can write this down, is the biggest number is not the best number. The biggest number is not the best number. And when I talk to so many service members, they're always like, I'm looking for the biggest number possible. Well, that's fantastic. So you get yourself your $120,000 a year job and you're living in Boston, Massachusetts. You think you're doing great, and your buddy down there has a $75,000 a year job in Dallas, Texas. And you say, okay, what's more valuable? Well, frankly, the $75,000 job in Texas, when you consider housing costs, taxes, all those kind of things. Not to include if you anticipate what healthcare is going to be. Hey, I've got a $100,000 a year job and I have a terrible, terrible healthcare plan and I have 4 children. Okay, well, that's not a great compensation package compared to your buddy, again, with a $75,000 a year job with a platinum medical plan. So we're going to jump into this. If you have questions throughout the presentation, there's a Q&A button on the bottom left-hand side. Type in those questions, and then I'll handle each one of those before we go on to the next slide. So, go to the next one, Brooke. So, understanding compensation. First of all, when you look at the military compensation versus civilian compensation, you got to think about these things. Compensation consists of a number of different things outside of just money. It's your pay, benefits, health insurance, retirement, taxes, and resources. Those are all the things we're going to talk about when it comes to considering what your compensation plan should be. Next slide. So compensation, next slide. So on your left-hand side is your military compensation. Right now, most of you think of my compensation as this. It's my base pay, it's my BAH, and it's my BAS. And for everyone out there knows, of those components, which one's taxed? Only your base pay is taxed in the process. Your BAH and your BAS is not taxed. On the civilian side of the house, compensation is your pay, the incentives you have financially, as well as the benefits package that may be thrown out there. So let's go dig a little deeper into each one of these. Next slide. So if you're like I was when my time in the military, hey, I figured out my military compensation by one thing, the Army Times. So every month I would go down to, or every January 1st, I would run down to the Army PX, buy the Army Times, open up to that center section, open it up there and go, woohoo, 1.4% raise. I knew what I was getting paid, and I knew what everyone else was getting paid based on my time and grade and my rank. So military pay is reported annually. That's again based on that time and grade. And most importantly, it's never negotiated. No one in this military member ever went into a command sergeant major or a command master chief and said, hey, I think I'm working harder than my buddies out there. Let me ask for a pay raise or ask me a little more money. It just does not work that way from the military side of the house. It does change somewhat when you become a civilian. So next slide. So here are the basics for you. Most of us, again, think of just base pay, BAH, and BAS. Well, your compensation right now, while in uniform, is much more than that. If you look on the right-hand side, you see those things that are part of your compensation you may not consider. First on there is, free healthcare. So everybody here in the military gets free healthcare. And I can tell you right now, once you become a civilian, you're going to realize, wow, that was a benefit or a part of my compensation that I really didn't think about. And I tell you right now, your whole idea about healthcare changes. When you're in the military, if you have kids, hey, the kids get a fever, 100, hey, you're automatically running them down to the clinic to get them checked out. When you become a civilian, you're like, fever of 100, no problem, splash water on them, cool them off. You're not worried about taking them to the doctor until it gets up to the 103 because of the cost of it all. But right now, that is a great benefit that you have and something you consider when you're getting out. All of you also have 30 days paid vacation. So in the civilian world, most people aren't going to offer you 30 days paid vacation right out the door. You may get 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever it maybe is, or you maybe negotiate that. But understand that's a great benefit you have right now in the military that most civilians don't have out there. Training holidays, or DONSs for the Army folks, day without no scheduled training and activity. There are no training holidays, there are no DONSs in the civilian world. There are the nationally recognized holidays, and each company recognizes different ones, but there are no things of, hey, you guys did great this week, take Friday off, or hey, we had no DUIs for 2 months, take Monday off. It just doesn't work out that way. Free gym membership, all of you got that. You don't take that into consideration now, but you get this free gym membership, fantastic gyms on military installations that you get to have every single day and get to use it whether you like it or not. And I didn't think anything about that until I met one of our people I work with, and she was all excited about going to the gym. And I said, how was it? She goes, wow, I'm really smoked. I had this great this program. It's called Boot Camp PT. And when she came in, I was like, well, what do they do? They said, well, they yell at us. They make us do push-ups and sit-ups and these crazy things called flutter kicks. And it's fantastic. And I said, well, what do you pay for that? And the guy goes, she goes, oh, it's only $120 a month. So I never realized throughout my 26 years in the Army on active duty that I had a great benefit that I wasn't aware of. Next thing on there is your retirement plan. All of you right now have a retirement plan. I served 20 years, and after those 20 years, I can still draw 50% of my base salary for the remainder of my natural life. That just does not exist in the civilian world. That's extremely expensive in terms of the fixed benefits like that, and they can't do it. So even with the military going to the blended retirement, this is still something that's out there for you that, again, most folks don't get the opportunity to take advantage of, which is 20 years and then draw your retirement the rest of the time out there. TSP, TSP is also a benefit that you have right now. That's basically your military 401k, but TSP is part of it all. Free phone. Free phone is something I never thought about it. When I retired and gave up, I was very, very, very happy to give away my military phone and said, leave me alone, because that phone called me at 2 o'clock in the morning every single time on Saturday nights. So I gave it up freely until the point where I was looking at a civilian phone going, wow, these things are expensive. So does your company offer you a free phone? Do they give you a data plan? If so, that's a benefit that you have right now in the civilian sector or in the military world. Clothing allowance, and then finally the tax breaks. So there are no tax breaks, or so there are no sales tax break for Walmart or for Target. When you go up in the civilian worlds, you're getting taxed out there unless you work in some states. So all of these are part of your compensation plan right now, and all of them are things that you may incur expenses on once you become a civilian. Next slide. All right, so civilian compensation. So when we're talking about this, I want to think of it in 3 major components. Your pay, what you're getting actually in salary, the money that's coming into your pocket, your incentives, which are bonuses, commissions, profit sharing plans, things out there. Those are also part of your actual financial piece you're going to get. And then finally, the benefits side of the house, your insurance, medical, recreation, retirement, etc. And we're going to talk about each one of those as we go through it all. And Martha popped up there as a great, also one of my slides. The last slide was in the military. There is subsidized childcare is a great benefit. When you become a civilian, there is no subsidized childcare. We'll talk about that more here in just a second. So next slide. All right, so how do companies determine compensation? And I get this all the time of that the company's trying to rip me off, or the company's trying to lowball me as possible. Here's the reality. They're not. They're trying to get you at a fair price that's going to keep you with that company. They come in and lowball you on the offer, and they come in at a certain price, and they know therefore competitors are offering more, then you're going to leave, and you're going to go on to the next company. So understand, when companies are figuring out what your compensation is going to be, they're doing research on it. They're figuring out what the market research is. What's the going rate for this particular skill set? And what's the experience of the employee that I'm bringing on there? Hey, how competitive is this? Hey, I'm looking for the TS/SCI clearance, who's a cybersecurity expert, who has 15 different certifications out there. There's not many of those folks out there. It's a competitive job. Therefore, I need to make sure my salary comes in. Job trends. What are the hot jobs out there? Who need people? And then location. Location is also based on that market research piece of it all. Understand that's part of it all. If you're a cybersecurity expert in Washington, D.C. with a TS/SCI clearance, your salary is going to be quite significant. If you take that same cybersecurity expert with a TS/SCI clearance and you move them to Fargo, North Dakota, that salary may be significantly less. Flip that on its head. Let's talk about a welder. I'm a welder in Washington, D.C. I'm going to make a certain amount of money, good job out there. I take that same welder and move them to Fargo, North Dakota, and their salary is going to go up significantly. So it's all driven on market research. Companies are not trying to rip you off. They're trying to get you at a fair price, and they're plugging all these things into the calculus to determine exactly how much it is that they're going to pay you once you get out. So don't think they're ripping you off, and understand they're doing research of it all as well as you should. So before any of you think about getting out or you're getting out, you should do the research on this as well. You can go to Glassdoor, you can go to Indeed, you can go to LinkedIn. All of them have tools out there that can figure out what your compensation is going to be based on your skill set, based on the job title, and based on the geographical location where you're looking to move. So do that research so you have a good idea on what that number is going to be for you based on the location you are. And I want to talk about the numbers real quick for you all. Understand when you talk to employers, they're never going to give you, for the most part, an exact number. Hey, we're going to pay you $98,248 for this job. They're going to give you a range of the salary. So based on the person's experience, competitiveness, the range may run from, hey, we're looking at a range from $85,000 up to $115,000 is the range for this particular position. So again, don't think you're going to get an exact number on what you're going to go on that end. Question on this slide was, how do I negotiate our salary if I've done the research, competitor companies for the same qualifications? If you have a number in your head, it's a great question from Latoya out there. It's a great question. You've got to figure out what your number is going to be. If you do your research, let them give you the range, and then if you are happy with that range, counter it all. Understand, and this was a hard thing for me to understand too, it's not a argumentative or adversarial relationship. If they come in and say, hey, I'm looking at a range of 120 or 130,000, and we think based on your experience, we're looking at 110, you come back and say, well, I understand that, but I think because of X, Y, and Z, my experience, my certifications, that kind of thing, I was hoping to get more to $120,000 range. That's perfectly acceptable. No one's going to be offended by it. Companies aren't going to be taken aback by the entire process. Now, I will give one some caution. We were working with one of our fellows in Washington, D.C. Through our fellowship program, and the company came in and gave them an offer of $120,000 to start off. And the person was offended, came back and said, I can't believe this. How dare you offer me $120,000? I'm worth $150,000. And frankly the company walked away and said, this guy has obviously bad expectations about what they're going to make. And I always call this the NFL syndrome when I talk about it. It's everybody out there knows someone who gets the job making $200,000 a year. And we all know that person. We want to be that person. We think we're smarter than that person. We think we're qualified that person. Therefore, I want to make that money. And that's why it's called the NFL syndrome. If you're a college football player, every college football player out there thinks they're going to the NFL. But the reality is less than 1/10 of 1% actually go to the NFL. So those guys who are lucky enough to make it, fantastic. But for the majority of folks out there, that is not going to be the case. And it's the same thing for us as we're thinking about our jobs. Yeah, we all want the $200,000 a year, and we know a guy who got it or a girl who got it. Does not necessarily mean we're the person who's going to get that piece. Ronnie asked a question here, says, as a retiring military guy, is there any virtue to negotiate not using the company's healthcare? Great question. Yeah, that is something you can do. So if you're walking up the street and saying, hey, I appreciate the package you've laid out, but understand I don't need your healthcare package because I have TRICARE for life. You can use that as a negotiation package. It very much comes down to the size of the company. If you're looking at a massive company with thousands and thousands of employees, it's really marginal for them on the impact that is. If you're looking at a small company, you tell them that, wow, that's good because that's an expensive piece is healthcare for the companies as well. So you can use it for a negotiation tactic. It, again, depends on the size and your company. And I always say, throw it out there when you start getting to the negotiation phase. throw it out there. Hey, I've got my own healthcare, and see what they can come back with on things. I've heard people say, I've done that, and they gave me a $5,000 signing bonus or $10,000 signing bonus, or they raised their pay by the amount of money it would have been to pay for the healthcare. So it does work out there, but you got to test it for the companies to go through it. So Ronnie, it's a great question. Next slide. So what let's talk about here is, benefits, civilian benefits, additional incentives to go through it all. So next slide. So what are the types of pay and financial incentives in the civilian world? You're going to have your base pay, what that's going to be. And you may be an exempt employee or non-exempt employee, which basically this difference is of a salary versus overtime. You may get commissions out there, overtime wages, tip income, bonus pay, merit pay, or in cases of some companies, you may be getting stock or stock options in the entire process. That's part of your overall pay perspective. And understand you need to take that into account. It's not like the military, here's my base pay, that's it. Things are calculated different. I mean, primarily, you'll see a lot of times is your base salary is going to be $70,000. And if you do well, you can get up to a 10 to 20 to 30% bonus per year based on your performance, based on the company's performance, based on your team's performance. So please understand all of that on those components. Commissions. If you're one of those people out there, I want to make as much money as I possibly can. That's the number one driving factor in my civilian world is I want to make bank, show me the money. Then you really consider some of these positions that are offering commissions. And that primarily consists of sales, and we're going to get to that commission piece. And I tell you, I would have never thought about sales if you would ask me 5 years ago when I was getting out, hey, you ought to think about going into sales. I would have said, no way. I can't do sales. I'm not a salesman. I know a lot about myself. That's not what I am. But I would tell all of you out there in the audience, if you've been in the military, you are all great salespeople. If you believe in your product, you can sell it all day long. I know that because over your careers, you've been given pretty stupid missions, pretty crazy missions. And if you're a leader, you've had to go back and sell those missions on why this is a great idea to your subordinates. If you're an NCO out there, hey, you've been selling, crazy, dumb lieutenant missions your entire career, having to go out there and convince those folks that this is a good idea. If you're a young first termer out there, you've had to convince yourself every morning that it's a great idea to get up at 5 a.m. and go stand out in the rain to do PT. Doesn't make sense. It's not smart, but you had to sell yourself that this is a great idea. So again, if you're into making big money, consider the sales piece of it all because there's lots and lots and lots of opportunity in that area. So next slide. So let's talk about other benefits out there. And I want you to take close attention to this again because all these things are critical again to the overall compensation that are out there. Healthcare, okay? Healthcare. I want you to think about this over and over and over. And I'll get to some questions here in a second on how to ask those questions. This is potentially, depending on your family situation, going to be your number one new household expense. It's not expense for you now because you are on TRICARE or you're on military health care. But when you become a civilian, this can get very, very expensive, very, very fast based on the number of children that you have in your family situation. So think about that. Pay and leave. When I talked about this already, what is your company going to offer you? Now, the standard's going to be out there is 10 days. And the civilians are not like military where they count weekends. If you have 10 days, that's 10 work days versus Saturday and Sunday part of it all. Vacation, sick days. Go do my sick days roll over. What holidays do the companies recognize? Maternity and paternity leave. Hey, if I have a baby, how many days off am I going to get it? And I can tell you right now, the civilian world is much more kinder and gentler in terms of the amount of time they're going to give off to mothers and fathers when they start having children in the entire process out there. So again, all these are questions to ask. Wellness plans. Never thought about this, but some companies will actually pay you to go to the gym. They will provide you gym memberships and they will incentivize you to go to the gym financially on out there. Why? Because it helps lower their overall healthcare costs for their health insurance. So they will do it all. So I got a friend of mine, he got out of the military and like most folks, he started gaining weight fast. And I was like, hey, aren't they paying you to go to the gym out there? Why are you getting so fat? He goes, Sue, Because I go to the gym, I sign each day, and then I leave. I'm not actually going inside the gym. I said, well, I don't think that's the intent of the piece of it all in the process. But understand that's part of all they may pay out there is going to the gym and giving those healthcare gym memberships. Childcare, okay, again, the question came up before about childcare and it being incentivized. It is not subsidized in the civilian world. If you get a company out there that provides you a childcare or subsidize your childcare, again, that's a great benefit for you that may be in the process. Meals, something else that I never considered whatsoever, but while you're in the military, you have a meal plan. You can go to your dining facilities or your cafeterias and still eat for probably around $14 a day, all 3 meals a day. In the civilian world, some companies offer the same thing. So I love my folks out at Facebook. I visited out there. I think it's 7 or 8 different restaurants they have on campus. Everything's free for the entire time for their employees that are eating there. LinkedIn, I always like telling the story. I went out for a meeting out in San Francisco with LinkedIn, showed up 8 o'clock in the morning, got there, and first thing they said was, let's go to breakfast. I was like, okay, where are we going? They said, come on inside. We came inside, guy standing there with a white chef's hat. What would you like for breakfast? And it was the full Monty of food, salmon, egg white omelets, you name it, they had it. And so we literally ate for free all day long right there in the building. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we were truly on the 14th floor up there at the headquarters, sipping on lattes overlooking San Francisco Bay, and it didn't cost me a dime to eat there all day long. So ask your companies, hey, is that part of their package that they're offering out there as you're moving forward? So next slide. So let's talk healthcare. Next slide. So first question you need to ask when you're talking to these employers are, hey, what type of plan is your employer offering? Because there are differences in each one of them all. Next slide. So the standard piece you're going to see out there are PPOs, HMOs, and health savings account. And this presentation is not designed at all to make you an expert on any of these. I need you to do the research on what type of plan are they going to offer, because each one is different and the pays are different, that kind of thing. But I will give you some questions to ask. Next slide. So ask the questions. Hey, what are the different plans you're offering? What's my advantage as an employee based on my kids? Is there out-of-network coverage? How much is my annual deductible be? How much is my copay going to be in the entire process? Is there a primary care physician required? Is there a referral required to see a specialist? All those things are questions you need to ask about these healthcare plans. And I can't emphasize this enough. This quickly can become, again, your greatest expense in your life, even higher than rent based on your family situation. And so the guys out there, again, I've got my $100,000 a year job. I'm excited about it. And I have a terrible healthcare plan that could be costing you $500 to $1,000 a month right out of your pocket to pay for your healthcare, your health insurance. So take into account, ask this question, do the research. Don't just, again, biggest number is not the best number when it comes to pay if you've got a terrible healthcare plan in the process. Make sure you're doing the research when you're asking the questions of these employers about what exactly it is you're offering us. Next slide. Retirement, okay, retirement. Again, we talked about this. If you're in the military and you have a retirement plan, the way it is now, congratulations. It's fantastic. And very few companies are going to give you what you have now, which is, again, 20 years and then 50% of my base pay for the remainder of my natural life. It's just too darn expensive in the process. But the kind of plans they have, next slide. Here are the standard ones that you're going to see for companies. What you guys have right now in the civilian terms is called the Defined Benefit Pension Plan, which is 20 years, 50%, 20 years, 40%, whatever it may be. In the civilian world, you're going to have these things called 401s, which most companies have. And we'll talk about there in a second, but there's 401 with a traditional and a Roth, and the difference between the two is purely the tax implications. Am I paying taxes on the front end of the money, or am I paying taxes on the back of the money? There's 403B plans, 457 plans, SAP, simple, you name it, all those out there. I emphasize this to you because when I got out of the military and I processed my company for the first time, I had no idea about any of this. And when the person said, hey, we have a 401k plan, how much would you like to contribute? And I was stupid and said, well, I want to keep as much money in my pocket as possible, so I'm going to contribute 1%. And I did that till I got home, and then my wife was with me, and she said, hey, did you process today? I said, yeah. She goes, how much is your company matching on your 401k? And I said, I don't know. She goes, well, how much did you contribute? And I said, 1%. She goes, you're not that smart. Go back there tomorrow and tell them you want to maximize that, because I was deferring the taxes on that money as well as it was my retirement plan. And I would tell you all right now, if you aren't retired from the military, this is your retirement. And you've got to plan for your long-term financial well-being early. And this is how it's done, is through these retirement plans and the process. So think about this. We've got a question here that says, 401, is it realistic to get the company to add to my Roth IRA? You can add to it all. So if you've got an existing plan already, then you want to add to it all, you may do that. Most companies are going to have their own, but many of them are transferable. So for instance, I have Fidelity as mine right now. And when I transfer, if I want a new job, my Fidelity can't go with me, and I can do there. That's a question you want to ask your employees. So Tony, great question on this. Another question was, overall, do post-retirement TRICARE plans do better for your family? What is offered in the civilian world? I will tell you right now, and this is something that they don't talk about enough, your TRICARE for life that you get as a retiree is truly the golden ticket. It is a platinum level healthcare plan. Amazing things out there. I know sometimes you hear different things about the medical system for the military. I can tell you right now from my personal experience, my TRICARE that I have right now, and I live here in Atlanta, is fantastic. I have my primary care physician who gives me my referrals. I've never had an issue whatsoever. It's been a fantastic plan, and it costs me nothing. Every time I talk to my civilian friends, I'm almost embarrassed and ashamed of how cheap my health insurance is compared to my civilian counterparts. It's truly one of those benefits that I never even thought about over my career that is truly, truly incredible. So to answer your question there for where that was, yes, your healthcare plan is fantastic. Next question was, when we're talking about compensation as it relates to benefits, medical, retirement, and dental issues, who will be speaking to these? HR. Yeah, so normally you can actually ask that question during the recruiting process to your recruiters. You can also ask that during the interview piece of it all. But I would try to most part, once they make the offer, then you're going to do it. But HR are the primary folks that are going to lay out your benefits package for you when you're doing the in-process listing, what those are. It should be part of your offer though. So when the company is actually giving you the offer letter for the company, they should lay that out. Here's your offer. Here's your compensation pay-wise. Here's the benefits we offer. Here's the incentives that we offer. Here's it all laid out for you in a document. So you should have that in place before you accept it. So again, ask the questions, get the offer, and then determine it all. Because again, these things are negotiable in many cases. It says, do you recommend rolling over your TSP to an employee retirement plan? I've heard that many employers recommend this, but in my understanding, that is not usually a good idea. I would actually talk to a financial advisor on that piece. I don't want to lay out that. I know personally, I kept my TSP from my military time. I keep that as another part of my overall investments portfolio, so I haven't rolled it over and took on my civilian 401k. But I am not, I'm not going to claim to be a financial expert in any stretch of the imagination, but I would talk to your financial advisor on that in terms of what you want to do with your TSP plan. And then finally, the question from Martha says, in other words, you always keep military TSP separate from post-retirement plans. Yeah, I do for me. But again, I would seek out some better advice than Chuck Hodges on that piece. Another question we got here is from William. It says, how much should I put in my budget spreadsheet for healthcare after transition? Standard family of 4, 10K. Again, that's going to be determined by exactly what your company is offering out there. And that's why it's such a critical question to ask. What type of healthcare plan are you offering? Because it's going to vary what it may be. If you have a dynamite platinum healthcare plan, the cost could be a lot less. If you have a terrible plan, you asked the question about 10K, I think $10,000 is a reasonable number to expect depending on the healthcare plan that you have out there. But again, you should ask that question because again, it goes back to what I said before. Hey, I want the most money possible, but I'd rather take $80,000 in a superstar healthcare plan than $100,000 and it's costing me that much when it comes to my healthcare. So ask that question out there. All great questions, folks. I appreciate those and keep them coming. Okay, next slide. All right, so here are the things that I want you to ask of these employers when it comes to your retirement. Hey, understand the rules and restrictions on the tax implications of each one of those plans. And that primarily comes down to whether it's a Roth or traditional. And what type of 401 do they offer? Because each one of them has different benefits for the employee as you're going through all. What's the employer match? That's super, super important. When does the match begin? So, hey, I start my company. Is there a waiting period? So I have to wait 6 months before I can enroll a 401k, or do they begin matching that money up front? And understand that's free money for you. For me, it's, hey, I'm going to add in 3% into my 401k, and the company's going to match me my 3% up there. That's money for your pocket. And right now, if you know, for 2020, the maximum employee contribution you can do right now is $19,500 a year. So if you're one of those folks who has retired and you've got a good retirement income coming in, you may want to consider maximizing your contribution, again, which is up to $19,000 a year. What is the vesting schedule? Ask that question as well. And then finally on there, what type of investment options are there and what are the fees? So when they're going to lay that out for you, for the most part, they're going to say, here's our plan, and you can determine, and it's pretty much risk on risk or conservative. Hey, I want to do risky investments with my 401, or I want a more conservative plan approach to it all. And again, ask that question. And you'll get that laid out for you when you start seeing what your 401k looks like. Okay, next slide. And then here are the two. So we talked about this a couple times already, but understand this, whether it's a traditional IRA or Roth, and it purely comes down to when are you going to pay the taxes? Are you paying them up front? Or are you paying them on the back end when you start drawing the money out? So again, where you are in your financial life, where you want to may drive the decision on how you want to, and which path you want to pick, whether it be a traditional or a Roth. Now, some companies may not even give you the option. You may say, hey, all we do is traditional. That's what it is. But again, a question that you would want to ask of these employers when you're moving forward. Okay, next slide. All right, now, once you figure out all this great money you're going to make and all these benefits you're getting and that kind of thing, I want you to really, really think about the tax implications of where you're going. No, go back one, please. And I say this from personal experience. When I retired, I was living in Washington State at a Joint Base Lewis McChord, and then we relocated here to Atlanta, Georgia. And when I moved here right away, I did not take into effect any of these things. I didn't take into effect, hey, there's going to be a state income tax that I'm going to have to pay here in the state of Georgia. I didn't take into effect of when I went to register my 3 vehicles, mine, my wife, and my daughter's. I go down to register the vehicles and I ask them how much it cost, and they tell me $3,000 to register my vehicles. I about fell out of my chair when the lady said that. I said, $3,000 to register my vehicles? Yes. So when you move to Georgia, we tax you based upon sales tax of your value of your vehicle. So that's what you've got to pay. And I didn't understand that or take that into consideration. So what I'm going to talk about here now are the states here in just a second. And I always tell people, do not take what I'm about to present to you as an indication of I'm trying to push you to one state or the other. You all need to live where you want to live. Normally that's a driving factor on people's transition. Hey, I want to go back to the South, or I want to go back to the Northeast, or I want to live in Texas. Basically, that's where my family's from. I want you to move where you want to move. I just want to make sure you take all this into consideration when you're making those decisions. So next slide. So here's the one I'll put on there is the states with income tax rates. And again, take this into consideration. Everybody knows, you look on there, the states, and we'll talk about it in a second, with no income tax, but understand where you want to go is going to vary. If you want to move into California, a fantastic state, lots of job opportunity out there, but understand they have the highest income tax of any state, the state income tax in the country. Oregon has no sales tax, but they have a pretty high significant income tax coming through it all. So all these things, before you go somewhere, think about this. So if I've got my $100,000 a year job in California, that's fantastic, okay? And I'm making $100,000 a year. Well, you may be paying 10% of that, if not more, 13% on the high side in your income tax. I take that same $100,000 a year job and I go over to the state in Nevada and I'm living in Las Vegas. Guess what? I'm not paying any of that in my income tax. So again, take that into account when you're making these decisions about where you want to leave when you're out there. Again, I live here in Georgia right now, and every single year, especially this time of year when taxes are due, boy, oh boy, we need to move back to where we're from in the state of Florida. I mean, it just comes down to the reality of what's it cost you to live in a certain spot. So take this into account when you're coming out and what you want to do and you're thinking about that overall compensation plan. Next slide. Okay, military retirement. So for all my folks out there who are retiring, you need to understand these are the 8 states right now that fully tax your military retirement. So you need to understand that going to it all. Great state of Virginia, very popular place for retirees that are out there, but understand they do tax your retirement. They've had the discussion with those guys before about reducing that, and they said, no way, it's a line item on our budget. We count on that to, for the Virginia budget because of the number of money dollars we make off our retirees. So again, making a decision about where you want to live, you should think about this as well. Now we're going to go through some more slides. These are the states that tax your retirement hands down. Next slide. These are the 20 states that don't tax your military retirement, but still have an income tax. So all those in red there are the ones that there is no tax on your retirement. It goes straight into your pocket. No one's touching the entire process. And I would always ask your states, because again, this is a great incentive that states are trying to put in place to incentivize veterans to come to these places. So take a look at this because it changes all the time as these state legislatures are coming through. So next slide. And then here are the 13 states out that have special provisions or other considerations. So like, again, I mentioned I live here in the state of Georgia. Georgia does tax retirement, but based on your disability rating that's out there, it varies based on your rating. And so there's certain incentives and special provisions that go through there based on your disability rating, your rank, and so on and so forth. So again, as we talk about on all these things, whether it be healthcare, whether it be your 401k, you need to do your research and research very well about what it is, what states tax or don't tax the money that I'm going through it all. So take that into consideration when you're moving to these locations. Next slide. All right, so got finished a little ahead of time. We've got one question on there that says, can we receive a copy of this presentation? Our plan is right now is everyone who registered for this particular block of instruction, we will be emailing those slides out to you at a later date. We're a little bit backlogged right now as we've been presenting presentations, but the goal is to get these slides into your hands. Now, I'll tell you, these slides are as good as of today. So again, based on the tax piece talked about, 441 compensation, always do your research. Because things change constantly. So I wouldn't want you to hold those slides and say, well, Chuck told me that, the state of X didn't tax my retirement, and now they do. So make sure you do the research on this piece. So other questions that you have going on there, please fire them away.